All yours. Do you want to switch over?
Cool. Thank you so much for coming down. It's so great to see so many of your faces in what's so far already been a really wonderful day with great talks to begin today. We are second and third Monzo people of the talk today. And we wanted to tell the story of a project that we've worked on recently. Before we get into it, how many of you have used Monzo before? Just raise your hand. Okay, let me look up there. All right. And how many of you are still using it, let's say, regularly or day to day? Okay, few hands, but I'll get over it. Cool. So if you've been using it regularly, you may have noticed that the way in which you pay people in the app or you're paying businesses has changed. And the work that we're going to talk to you about today is a process that led to that change and the lessons that we picked up along the way. Before we get into the main act, we wanted to talk a little bit about us and who we are and our journeys. So me, I'm Heldiney. I'm from a very small island in Africa called São Tomé and Príncipe. This is me very proudly posing next to my favorite toy in that island. My mum had moved from the island that I was born and she grew up in to Lisbon in Portugal. And she wanted a picture to see how I'm doing, so we went to this photo studio, we took a picture for her, and that's a really memorable moment in my childhood that says something about me as well.
Amazing. Wow, our faces are big here. Hi, everyone. My name is Giorgio. I'm on the right, and I grew up in a small village in Italy, just off the Alps. And when I was young, I then moved to Wales, and part of my family is American, and so I think this is a picture I found on my mom's Facebook the other day, somewhere in America in a summer vacation. Now, when Heldiney and I were putting together these slides, we were thinking about what has been a momentous moment in our lives growing up that we wanted to share with you so you can understand a little bit about how we think. And for me, it was back when I was a teenager. My friend and I were driving through town on a Friday night through Wales, and we saw a big group of people standing outside of a pub. Naturally, we jumped out of the car, thought, ooh, what's going on here? And when we got there, we noticed there was a man on the floor surrounded by these people, blood all over his face, he wasn't breathing. And so I looked and said, well, who's called 999? And no one had. I said, well, who's treating this man? Who's giving CPR? And this group of adults were just standing there, all kind of in shock, all helpless, said, we don't know what to do. And so as teenagers, I just looked and said, well, okay, we'll try something here. So I said, you call 999. You go move the car so the ambulance can get through. And we gave this person CPR, and really fortunately, he started breathing. The ambulance came, and it really ended in a nice story. But I was left with this feeling of frustration, of seeing this group of adults here with feeling a bit powerless and helpless on what do we do here? Not even being able to call 999 because they were in shock. And so I had this feeling of frustration and wanted to do something about it. And so I worked with the British Heart Foundation for the next couple of years to help lobby in Parliament to get schools to teach first aid to all students growing up, with the idea that we would get the entire UK trained so that wouldn't happen again. And so that frustration led me to a really big project, which I'm really proud of, that I worked on.
And my equivalent is in 2018, I want to say, roughly 7 years ago, I went through a really difficult period. Emotionally, I was going through a breakup, and I felt that I could benefit from speaking to someone. I Googled, what do you do in these moments? It was the first time I ever felt that way. And I found the number for a helpline that was 24/7, it was free, and they were called Samaritans. So I gave them a call, and I had a wonderful experience. I shared what I was feeling, what I was going through. And it was the first time in my life that I felt like someone really made room just to listen to me, not give me any advice. And I said to myself at that moment in time, whenever I feel great again, I want to learn how to do what this volunteer did, and I want to give back however I can. So about 8 months later, I became a volunteer. I've been a volunteer for 6 years now. I eventually became one of the leaders of the mentoring team. I'm now a director of one of the branches as a volunteer, and you probably see my face on the website. So when you see that face on the website, hopefully you don't visit it often, because if you're there, there's probably something going on. But it's also a really memorable experience for me, of something that meant a lot to me, and then I helped raise awareness of the ways in which men, and I was specifically chosen for the campaign as well as a black person, because black men especially struggle to speak about their feelings, there are various cultural reasons. And this is a moment that stood out to me when we were looking about our stories that says a lot about what's important to me. As we were preparing this, it really stood out to me that both of us have this instinct to, when we see opportunities where we could help and/or our influence could make the experience of other people better, we instinctively want to do something. In my case, even after I myself went through something that I found particularly difficult. And we want to tell you a little bit about our Monzo selves. So we've both been at Monzo for almost 3 years. We've been part of a team called Core Experience. As the name would imply, we look after, or we've been looking after, a lot of Monzo's core parts of banking. So making a payment, requesting money, moving money between various pots in your account. So for those of you not familiar, a pot is basically a money container in your Monzo account. It can be a savings pot where it's earning interest, or it can just be a space that you put money aside to pay your bills each month. And we have so far had a team culture. It's very playful, very welcoming. A lot of that is the influence of Giorgio as our PM. And we could have the most serious meetings where we'd start the conversation and we're talking about an important decision that we need to make, but it's lighthearted. Someone jumps in with some kind of Google background and immediately lightens the mood. And it's felt so far like a very psychologically safe space for everyone in the team. And this is some of the work that we've done over the past sort of 2 years-ish that we've been together as a team. So moving money between your pots, requesting money with a QR code, being able to easily pay someone that is requesting money with a Monzo.me link, and a variety of other things that we're all really, really proud of. One story that stands out from that experience is a story of how we found commonalities between Shrek, Brisket, the Bee Movie, and 1,000 billion pound. So at Monzo, we have what's called a peer-to-peer payment network. So for banks, at least with us, there are largely 2 ways that you can pay a person or another business. One of those is called faster payment services, which uses a sort code and account number, which most of you will be familiar with, if not all of you. And another one is called peer-to-peer, where if you're on Monzo, you have their phone number or another way to get them on Monzo, then you can pay without having their account number and sort code. But what that means is we don't have the same, say, character limits that you would have on a faster payment service, which would be 18 characters. You can basically put, up until that point anyway, an infinity long set of characters for your payment request or the payment that you're making. What that meant is that we did some analysis and we realized that people were actually using Monzo's payment requests and Monzo's payments as a backup for when they'd been blocked in all of their other platforms in social media, so Twitter, Facebook, what have you, to message their exes or say things that would be hurtful and abusive because this is the last medium they had left. And the analysis also showed us that we had, at 55,000 characters, part of the script of the Bee Movie, part of the 17,000 characters, part of the script of Shrek, and the list goes on of interesting things. But in light of noticing this, we decided to prioritize some work that would make it easy for our users themselves to protect themselves in the platform. We ran some research where we spoke to some of the people that received some of the payment requests and payments that included this content in the reference, and one specific person that we spoke to stood out to me, where they said that they had been in an abusive relationship and they had blocked this person everywhere else, but it was only Monzo that was the last place left that they could send them abusive things. So we shipped this and we immediately saw that people were self-serving, a way to block other people on Monzo, and we felt that we'd made the platform safer for other people in Monzo.
And I'm really proud of that product. It's one of my favorite products actually at Monzo. But in the past year or two, we've worked in a different mode. So teams at Monzo in product squads typically work in one of 2 ways. A growth squad, where a team is looking at how to optimize a single metric, so looking at A/B testing and a lot of iterations. And also then in value mode, where it's let's look at this very deep customer problem, spend a lot more time in research and product development, and ship something over a course of months. And you have a mix of these two teams, so they push different areas of the company. And for a while, when we were looking at making it easier for customers to find someone else to interact with on Monzo, one of the key metrics for us we were looking at was the number of people who shared contact access. And so we worked on that for a while, looking at iterations and experiments on how we describe what we do with your data privacy, what we do with with the permissions, and really working on that. And this actually had great uptick. And in our research, it showed it was really, really helpful for customers with that extra information and that bit more context. But it still wasn't quite hitting the kind of metric movers that we wanted it to hit. And the more research we did, the more we realized we can only experiment so far, and at some point we're going to need to spend a bit more time looking at the bigger problems. And when you go into that mode of saying to stakeholders, we're going to spend 3 months without shipping anything, that's a real problem. And I think stakeholders typically get quite scared, thinking, well, where's the momentum? What are we going to do? What's going to happen? So we introduced a new way of working in our team. While product research design started thinking about the longer-term vision, engineers owned something that we called light improvements. On a Monday morning, an engineer could pick up a ticket or an idea from customers or from staff or somewhere else, or something they've seen. And they pick that up on a Monday, and the goal would be to ideate, test, build, and launch it by that end of that week. And they would bring it to Heldiney and myself for a bit of input and feedback. But this meant we were able to get a lot of changes shipped while we were spending time in the research section. Now, during that time, we shipped over 25 different changes. Things which on their own might not be a big story, but when you add these up, the impact is actually really big. These are things such as being able to edit your pot transfers really easily without having to cancel it and set a new one up. Other things such as sending payment reminder requests. So if I request £5 from Heldiney, I could now click a little remind to Heldiney if he still hasn't paid me, please pay me back. And these little things really added up to give a great momentum for the team and really give us buy-in and a bit of breathing room. And while the engineers were focusing on that, we were focusing on which problem do we want to go deep in. And put together a list of user jobs across Monzo. So as a customer, I want to send somebody money, I want to download my statement, and I want to lock my card. And we ranked all of these based on the number of users doing this each month, how often they're doing this, and then how we thought the experience felt today, based on customer research, customer contact, but also our own opinions and our intuition on using these products. And from doing this, we landed on a focus for our team around payments, around moving money, sending money, and anything around that sort of general topic. And the first product we built was something we call Move Money. For those of you who do have Monzo, you may have a joint account, a business account, personal pods. You might have a lot of different areas. And moving money between these was never as easy or intuitive as it should be. And this was our most requested feature for about 5 years from customers, to be able to say, let me pick any source, let me pick any destination, and just send money there. Why do I have to go through a convoluted kind of mess to get there? And so we worked on this, and it's been great. It's been adopted from other teams across Monzo and really setting the foundations going forward. But we also discovered, going into our first bigger project, we had some tension. The ways of working in a bigger project change. And I mean, I'm speaking to a room of quite a few engineers in here. One thing Heldiney and I were doing was, once we started getting our hands on it quite late on, we went back to the engineers and said, hey, this is great, but we would want to tweak these things. And they just looked at us and said, could you not have told us weeks ago? This would have really saved us a lot of reworking. And we realized that how we were giving feedback and when we were doing that needed to be tweaked. How we were giving requirements up front could have been improved, and just the whole kind of setup. And these are really important things we learned on this project, which we were then really keen to take forward and improve going forward on the next ones.
All right, now to the main bit, the bit that hopefully you're all here for. I'm sure you're also here for other talks. But when we were thinking about how to frame the story that we wanted to tell today, we thought about the board game Snakes and Ladders. And if you're not familiar with that, family disagreement creating game, you have effectively a set number of squares in the game. You roll a dice, you move the number of steps that dice states. You either go up a ladder if you land on a square that has a ladder, and you or you go down a number of steps if you land on a snake. Going up is good, going down is bad. And you're trying to get to the finish line and win and brag to everyone in your family how great you are. So what the payment experience looked like before we did the work, it's fairly simple. If you're paying someone new, you input their sort code, their account number. You let us know whether you know them to be a person or a business. And in some contexts, you may have to save a reference as well, but in this experience, it wasn't reflected. And then once you go through to make a payment, you can say the amount you want to pay. You can input a reference. If it's via faster payment services, in this case where you're adding account number and sort code, then the reference limit is 18 characters. If it's a Monzo native payment, then there is no limit. And you can also schedule that payment to take place in the future and or to repeat over time. We knew that the experience needed to be better. Monzo had changed and evolved a great deal since this first payment experience was created. Like Giorgio mentioned earlier, we grew to have joint accounts and we grew to have various different pots. We grew to have business accounts. But the payment experience didn't allow you to easily switch which account you're paying from once you're in the experience. Didn't allow you to easily reuse references that you'd already used in a really intelligent way. And there were a range of other ways in which we knew that this experience could be better and would grow with us more clearly. But because of the nature of making a payment, just because we've made it better, doesn't mean you suddenly have more people to pay, nor does it mean that you have larger payments to make. But what we wanted people to feel like is that when they're making a payment using Monzo, we wanted them to feel that they are safe, that they can trust that the payment is going to the right place, and that the ease with which they can do that is really straightforward, perhaps better than anywhere else. The speed matches the headspace that they're in. If they're making a payment for a very large mortgage deposit or paying a solicitor, then you want to feel like you're going at the pace that you want to, and before that large amount of money leaves your account, you want to be sure that it's going to the right place. And equally, if you're just paying a £5 to someone for dinner last night, very cheap dinner, you want that to go really quickly as well. So we created these principles that helped us prioritize and helped us understand what we were working towards as a team. And at the very top of that, we wanted it all to feel really wonderful. So once you meet all these functional needs, we wanted it to have a little touch of delight that we really like to achieve at Monzo as well. Giorgio and I had a lot of fun, arguably too much fun, as you will learn later today, coming up with ideas and grounding on the research that we had and thinking about all of the ways in which we could create what we wanted to be the best payment experience of all time. And actually in that space, we thought about a custom keyboard, and the accessibility-minded people in the room will know the challenges there. So we decided to not go down paths that were very complex like that. But we narrowed all of our ideas down to 12 potential things that we could do that would feel really good. So we knew that there are many people who use screen readers to browse their mobile device, on TalkBack, on VoiceOver, and we wanted Monzo payments to work really well with those. One of our Monzo's mission is to make money work for everyone, and in order to do that, you really have to make it work for everyone. So accessibility was a really important part of what we wanted to achieve. We wanted to make it really straightforward for someone to copy the account details that they've received from a friend over messages, and the list of things goes on here.
And it's kind of funny, we had such huge momentum. This project was really kicking off with such a great feeling all around us. It was something stakeholders have been asking for a long time, customers have been asking for a long time, and the designs, the custom keyboards we should have done, but it was just a really, really great time. And I put together a meeting with a number of our stakeholders and directors and said, here is the plan. Here are the decisions we've already made. Here are the areas we're still exploring, and this is what we're going to do. And we're so confident that it's June today, but we're so excited, we have such good momentum, we're going to ship this by the end of August, this whole new payments experience. And the end of August also lines up perfectly with my birthday. So the message was, we're going to ship a brand new payments experience by my birthday in 3 months. And the room went crazy, at least in my head it did. And, and we came out of there with such big hype, which is an amazing thing. In a team, you always want to try and generate that excitement around the work you're doing. And we look at this like in terms of snakes and ladders, and we definitely had our first ladder at this point, feeling just excitement absolutely everywhere. and we had a clear line of sight to the finish line, and we're super optimistic. And this continued. This is a screenshot of our Android engineer, Ed, pretty quickly in the project saying, hey, I've got a working version of confirmation of payee. It's there, look, we just tested it. And huge excitement throughout the team, throughout the stakeholders again. And we also, from our earlier projects, we knew we had to do better at two things: bringing people on our journey with us and testing earlier and giving feedback earlier. So we did this in a few ways. We, one, made sure all our team and staff members were able to opt in while we built this, so they could give us feedback as they wanted to and just get excited by the progress we're making. But we also made this available to customers who could do the same thing. They could also opt in and try this feature as we went. And for feedback, we introduced something called usability sessions. We brought, at the end of each big milestone, or something when we built something really big, we would get together with the whole team: engineering, product, design, but also data science, research, and customer support. We would all get onto a fig jam, like a fig jam board, and we would put 3 sections. What do we love about the new experience that we're trying? And really giving kudos and shouting out the excitement we all feel. But then in yellow, what are some things which we want to improve? And now's a good time to do it because we're still in the development phase. And these could require some design rethink or maybe just improvement in how we implemented something. And then red, what is broken? What just does not feel right? It may have looked good on a Figma screen, but in your hand, it just doesn't feel the same. And we had a number of things here. And this was actually a really, really great exercise and great feedback from the team and engineers on working in this kind of approach. But as we started doing these, we started realizing, okay, the reds and the yellows are kind of piling up, which is okay, but it's not going to be as easy as we first thought. This is probably going to require some stamina from us and from stakeholders around us as well. And then this followed with some of our more senior engineers leaving the team. One of our iOS engineers decided it was time to leave the UK and go back to Australia. So not only do you lose a very experienced engineer, but you also lose all that context. All that. So when you bring someone new, you've got to onboard them, and that slows the whole project down, and the chemistry within the team changes. So that had quite a bit of impact for us. And we also realized we massively, massively underestimated some of the work. No one's done that here, I'm sure. And it was pretty amazing where when we estimated one of our pieces that Heldiney will speak to in a second, we thought 3 weeks. 3 weeks, we have this. What could go wrong? A couple months later, we finished it. And so this was our first snake. This was the first time in this project we lost a bit of that momentum, and we thought, okay, this isn't going to be as straight as we thought. But we still have hope. We can still keep going.
And like Giorgio mentioned, one of the things that we underestimated significantly, to say the least, is confirmation of payee. Now, for those of you not familiar, confirmation of payee is effectively a service that every UK bank or most UK banks have, if you're doing things right, where when you input someone's sort code and account number, their name, whether it's a personal or business account, the confirmation of payee service will check that you're paying the right person. And how that works is, let's take the example of our friend here, Paul Stamets. If you've seen Fantastic Fungi, he's the mushroom guy. And Paul says, hey, Monzo, I'm paying my friend, they're called Steve Jones, and this is their sort code and account number, and I believe it's their personal account, not their business account. So then we'll say, hey, Paul, we're just going to double check with the receiving bank that the details that you've given us actually belong to a person, and that person is called Steve Jones. So what will happen is through open banking, our confirmation of payee service, which we will build ourselves, will speak to Barclays' confirmation of payee service, which in this case is the receiving bank. And we'll say, hey, Barclays, can you let us know if this account is one of yours, it belongs to a person, and that person is called Steve Jones. And we might get a response that says, hey, Monzo, we do have that account. It does belong to a person, but they're called Stephen Jones, not Steve Jones. And from that response, we'll then let our friend Paul know, hey, Paul, it looks like that account does exist, but the name that you've entered is not the name that we've been told by Barclays. The name is actually Stephen Jones. You can continue anyway if you're sure, or we can easily correct this for you so you have the right person saved. And broadly, there are three types of returns that a confirmation of pay service can give. There's one category that's a full match, basically. So you've entered Stephen Jones, you've entered as a person, the account number is right, and the sort code is right. All good, you're good to go ahead, and we'll let you know that this is the right person. And a partial match is what you saw earlier. So instead of Stephen, you've put Steve. And because you've given us enough information that's right, we can tell you what the right information is. So it's not Steve, it's Stephen. And a no match is you haven't given us enough information that's right for us to correct it for you. So instead of putting Steve Jones, you said John Jones, very creative of me. And we'll have to ask you to check the details in real life. So you may have to speak to the person who gave those details to you, or do something in the real world that we can't necessarily control. Cool.
And as I said earlier, we thought this was going to be a pretty small project. And when we got into it, the realities are that, yes, there are 3 states, but there are 16 different reasons customers can end up in a no match or partial match. And that blew up the number of edge cases we had to start testing for. And not only that, but confirmation of pay is also a regulated service. So we had to make sure we were going line by line through compliance checks to make sure we were achieving all of those things. So that started to really add a bit of time to our project. And we also weren't building the Monzo payments experience. We were building a new one, which means we couldn't just ship something without meeting a minimum bar. Customers were used to being able to schedule payments, to be able to easily select a reference that you've used in the past, to have confirmation of pay and the fraud checks in there. So we actually had a number of dependencies starting to stack on top of each other. And people said to us, why don't you just chunk it up and launch it in pieces? But we really couldn't, not until we had enough of the product built, which wouldn't be a regression to customers. So that also made it more difficult for us. And at this point, John, my iOS engineer, looks at me and says, "Don't worry, Giorgio, we will still hit it for your birthday, but next year." And this 2-month project, we all started feeling, oh God, this might actually turn out to be a 12-month project. And the vibe at this point really started going. And as a PM, I could just look and just think, oh shit, what is going on here? How to I lead my team down this, what can we do? How do we get this kind of so wrong? And not only did we hit a snake, we actually hit a double snake and really threw us right down to the bottom and thinking, oh, a lot of things are going wrong. We are so over time. What are we going to do in this space?
And to add to that pile, the Monzo, like any healthy organization, was also looking at its ambitions for the next X number of years and understanding, well, what do we need to prioritize in order to reach these goals? Where should people be in order for us to achieve those goals? So the company was going through a reprioritization. So there was some ambiguity, and at some point we knew that our team wasn't, though it was an important team and the work that we were doing mattered, some of the other priorities that the company had at that point in time were a bit more important. So we had to take some of the people that were in the team and we had to put them elsewhere, Giorgio and I included. And in that space, with the context of the past 2 or 3 years that we've had in tech, you're also wondering, do we have jobs? Are we okay? And though Monzo handled the experience really well, they were really reassuring throughout. It's an emotionally difficult space to be in because not only are you working on your project, but you're wondering, like, do I go on LinkedIn and start making myself available for things? And that influences the emotional space that you're in. So once we actually knew what teams we were going to be in and we were reassured, there's another variable of starting to be stretched across different initiatives. So not only me, for example, I was working on the core experience team and still making sure that we were delivering a really incredible payment experience, but I was starting to think about different problems in business banking, so my headspace and time was starting to be competed for in that space as well.
And so in this state where we're going through, stress from the timelines, projects taking longer than we thought, the emotional headspace, we also then wanted to add more stress to ourselves. And so we ran an experiment. And one of the goals, the design principles we had in this project was to reduce cognitive load. Basically reduce the number of things we're showing to somebody on the screen at all times so that they can kind of focus and not get overwhelmed and see what is only important for them to see. Now, when you make a payment at Monzo in the old experience, when you finish it, you would see this screen on the left. It would show you a number of categories, and you can select one. And categories are really important when you want to use our budgeting tools. So you can see, I made 3 payments for eating out and 10 for shopping, and you can understand how you spend your money. If you don't use our budgeting tools, then this screen is actually kind of getting in your way, and it's kind of an irrelevant screen for you. But it's also not telling the user, hey, the payment you may have just sent, maybe that £5, maybe that £10,000 payment. We don't tell you that it's been sent correctly. We don't tell you who it went to or what the reference was. And looking at reassurance, that was a really important thing we were doing, that we wanted to do. So we designed this screen on the right, which had an animation. Heldiney worked on some really nice sounds for this, and haptics was great. And we then had this idea of, let's show 4 categories, and let's personalize these. So if you tell us, oh, the reference is thanks for eating out, we would suggest eating out or food kind of category for you. And if there was something you still wanted but we didn't suggest it correctly, it's behind one button. And we thought, this really works. This is great. Really happy with this. Then we ran the experiment. And the results came in, and we saw a really big drop to people who normally would engage with our budgeting tools, and they weren't using it anymore. And we looked into it, and we saw, OK, this isn't great. What do we want to do here? And when we worked with the team responsible for budgeting tools, there was a lot of tension. They were really unhappy that their metric has dropped so much. We weren't sure about how we wanted to iterate on this. And they used a really famous sentence with me, which is kind of funny looking back at it, which was, this isn't cutting the mustard. And none of these changes are going to cut the mustard. You've got to revert everything. We thought, well, we're not going to revert everything. Hang on a second. And so normally, the way we'd handle this would be to iterate on the designs, iterate on the suggestion algorithm. But we were still dealing with the fact that in a couple of weeks, the team was going to be disbanded. We didn't have all that time to actually go and invest in this. So we started looking at trade-offs during this project of, OK, what is a good enough experience we're happy with that achieves our goals, but also recovers the drop to budgeting tools? So we ended up in a state like this. In terms of the cognitive load side, we didn't really solve that one too well, but we did solve a really, really important side on the safety and the trust piece, which is at the top, we still confirm the payment was sent, and to who, and for how much, and what reference you used. And that is one of the most important parts on this. And the style we were going for with a reduced cognitive load are still things which could be iterated on in the future, but we had to start making decisions on shipping what's right. And during this period, we were, over time, the metrics weren't promising in some of our experiments. And there's this general feeling of embarrassment. And definitely in product, I think in engineering, they also felt it, and in design, every discipline of, are we good at our jobs? How did we get these things so right? This other team is basically telling us, revert all your changes. These aren't good. It's like, well, there's something here. Hang on a second. But everyone was feeling very stressed at this point. And when you mix stress, embarrassment, everything else, it's not a great outcome. And as like the PM of the team, the product manager, I was just like, I just want to like run and hide and let someone else solve all these things and just be OK with it. And at this point in the project, we were right back at the beginning. We really felt we don't know if we can continue. We actually don't know if stakeholders will give us a few more months. We were way over. I think this was January at this point. We thought we'd ship in August. And this was our next ladder. Sorry, snake, every time. And we had to really dig deep and keep going. And the nice thing about our team culture, our team vibe, is, and Monzo in general, is that you are really hard on the problems, not so much on the people. And so we all came together and looked at what are the biggest problems right now. And we started by setting expectations, again. And so we brought our stakeholders, our directors. I saw on a Slack post, somebody said, the payments experience is going to ship any day now. I thought, well, it's about 3 months away, so I should probably tell someone. And so we brought everybody back in. We had a really, really tough conversation. You don't want to go in and say, we are way behind timelines, but we did that. And we explained our plan for going forward. And everyone came out of that room with a bit more of an understanding of when this would go out and the realistic timelines, but also an agreement that, yes, this is really important work, and we are going to commit to it as a company until it ships properly. And then accepting we won't be able to ship everything. as a PM, as a designer, you get really excited by all the customer value you're going to deliver, and you get really almost attached to some of your products. So de-scoping things becomes a lot more difficult. Now, our engineering manager is great because when we were looking at the animations, all these, she just looked at me and said, we have 3 weeks to still test and ship safely. We're not building those things, not until we get everything else sorted first. And what I call maturing as a product manager is understanding that, okay, we need to actually prioritize those things. And we need to make sure we ship this safely. And even if it comes at the cost of a bit of the product at times, we can always iterate in the future. And for the first time in weeks, we had, again, really clear sight to the finish. We were like, okay, people are happy. We have a plan. We are absolutely good.
And I'm the bringer of bad news in this situation, where one of the screens that we'd created, where if you go in the experience today, you'll see not only a list of the people you've paid recently, you also see a list of all the people you can pay in your Monzo account, and you also see all these different payment options, so make a bank transfer, pay via links, so on and so forth. So because we wanted to reduce cognitive load as part of this experience, we wanted to bring simplicity to the screen. We wanted to show you just the people and businesses that we know you pay all the time. So we'd suggest them at the very top. And if you want to add someone new, you can do that. If you want to see all of them, you can do that. And if you want to pay internationally, you can do that too. And one thing that we did is the option to pay using a link and the option to pay someone near you was put behind paying someone new. And we saw that that decision, unfortunately, meant that people really struggled to find that. And there were some other issues with the actual loading of this screen because we had to fetch the people that we would suggest. It would take a little while longer for the screen to load. And because of the time constraints and the various things that we've mentioned that we were working to, we had to make a difficult call. And we decided to ultimately deprioritize that screen. And it wouldn't break the experience, but it would mean that we can still ship a lot of really good things without feeling blocked. And it felt like we were so close, but yet it felt like there was still possibility of this thing that we'd worked hard on and we felt was really important for our customers could potentially be ripped from under us.
And so exactly that. And that was another snake in the project, kind of right near the finish line. You're really starting to struggle of like, oh, I'm getting tired. I need to keep momentum going. And that meant as the PM, it was a lot of ruthless prioritization. As Heldiney said, we had a choice of, ideally we would iterate on this screen. There were some easy-ish iterations, but that requires time and another experiment to prove it. And we didn't have that. And so we prioritized, we already have a lot of value we can ship now. Let's prioritize that and look for ways to make sure this gets picked up in Monzo later. Our team may not exist, but Monzo still does. And these things are really important. So we looked for other teams who were working in a similar space or had some kind of vested interest and got agreement that they would look into this later in the roadmaps and eventually iterate and ship those features as well. And we ended up shipping, which is amazing, which is really, really great. And from those 12 things that we put at the beginning of the project, most of them were green. They're out to customers. They're in your apps today. The yellows are things which we got very close to. We couldn't get over the line in time or required more iteration. But we already have these committed to things that will be looked at in this half and hopefully coming out to the apps near you soon. And only one thing we de-scoped from the project. Now, starting a project early in June last year with all this hope, all this vision, and then thinking we're only going to de-scope one thing is actually a really great outcome for us, like for any product development team, especially when you're months over budget, over time. So really happy with that. And I could not get a sports thing in here. And when we finally shipped this is just how I felt. I didn't run around Monzo shirtless. I wanted to. We have HR. But it was really, really just an amazing, amazing moment. And we hit that goal. We eventually hit that. And it cracked me up this morning when Sophie, you were chatting about all the roads kind of going left and right. It's true with everything. With product development, there are so many ups and downs, so many snakes and ladders, if you will.
And what it means ultimately in terms of the product itself and what we're trying to achieve. One thing that we found really interesting is that before you make your payment, we introduced a step where you have a confirmation of all the payment information. If you're making a payment right away, we'll show you the person you're paying, the amount, the reference, where you're paying them from. If you're scheduling it, we'll let you know how often that payment is going to repeat, when it's going to go out the first time, so on and so forth. And even though we introduced a step, more people went through the flow. So if you entered the flow, you'd be more likely to go through and make a payment, even though we added a step. So it's really fulfilling to find moments where you add good friction, you add a screen, and more people complete the flow. I thought that's a really good experience of what good friction can look like in design. And we saw no drop to key metrics and a bunch of other good things. The pyramid that we showed you earlier in terms of how we wanted to measure success qualitatively as well, it was really reassuring to see that the qualitative feedback that we were receiving from people, basically at the end of a payment, you'd have something that would ask you in Monzo's home, how did you find making that payment? Maybe some of you even responded to that. Most of what people were saying they liked about it was very aligned with the goal that we were trying to achieve. People were saying it's really nice to know I'm paying the right person, this is really fast, really smooth, really easy. And it was a really proud moment that despite all of these challenges, we achieved our goal and we did something that was really meaningful for Monzo and for our customers. And on the meaningful for Monzo bit, we also, part of the reason I think we underestimated it, we didn't fully grasp just how meaningful of a project this was for Monzo. This is the payment experience that's now going to be used for all of our business accounts. It's going to be used for our joint accounts. We have customers in the United States as well, and we have a United States experience, and that payment experience is going to be ported over there as well. And it's laid a lot of really good foundations for Monzo and where it's heading that aren't only meaningful now, but meaningful towards our ambitions in the future. We want to talk about two things that we're really proud of, specifically in the project. One of them for me is, let's say you've received a text message from a friend, and it says, here are my account details, here's my sort code and account number, thank you so much for dinner. You can copy that whole message, so you can just select the whole message. You can go on your Monzo app, and you can tap one button, and we'll sort out the sort code and account number and paste in the right fields for you. We can't do that with a name yet, it's a bit more complex, but on Android, you can already do this, and it's soon coming to iOS as well.
And then when you're doing confirmation of pay, so when you're paying somebody, every time you pay someone now, you will see a all details match kind of message with a verification tick every time you do that payment. So you build that reassurance every time. And in cases where details don't yet match, we'll tell you. Some details don't match yet. If we can tell you why, we tell you, and we let you change that within the experience very easily. And if we can't tell you why, we also let you know, and we suggest the next best action. And building on that sense of trust and security and always having that green tick up there, it's something I'm really proud of because it helps customers feel confident when making that payment. Cool. Now, to summarize, every project you'll ever have will always have its ups and its downs, or its snakes and its ladders. What starts as just a product strategy and a vision at the very beginning, and you get all this excitement, and you put it into clear Figma designs, and you start building. That is what begins, and then you have real life that gets in the way. And you have your ups and downs, and that might mean you change some of the implementation style. You might change scope. You might have to cut scope. But what eventually ships to your customer is that, and that's what you're starting to protect, still making sure it is sticking to the main goals of the project. And there's a bit of personality in what you deliver that the team's gone through. And making sure you're still really proud of what ships to the customer is really the key message here. Now, I'm super proud of this. This payments experience, I've used it recently, and I always think like, God, it feels so nice. So I'll congratulate myself for it. And classic PM, didn't do any of the work. But anyway, that was really great. And then it's also one of my things I'm super proud of because it's also my last product at Monzo. And I didn't get fired, okay? I saw the concerns. We were over time, but it wasn't that bad. I've decided after almost 3 years at Monzo, now is the time for me to go try something else. I'm moving to the US. But it's a very poetic way to finish a couple of years at the company and then stand on stage with Heldiney, and he's also my best friend, and kind of talk you through this. When you use a product, you don't realize the emotions and the stress that team has gone through to get it out. You probably just slate it. And it's amazing to actually stand up here and have like a therapy session with everybody to explain this. So thank you very, very much for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you.
Amazing. Chaps, I'll let you off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brilliant stuff. Oh,